Everybody has done things they aren't proud of, but sometimes the guilt we carry for our past can make us feel as though we're unworthy of having good things happen to us in our present or our future. We can feel as though if something good does come to us, someone will then promptly state how we don't deserve it because of the things we've done. The fear of others' judgment, or even just our own judgment of ourselves, can keep us from going after the good things we want. This sort of limiting belief was present in the mind of Dai Innoue. Dai had spent much of his adult life working for a company called the AI Corporation in their bondband department. The company had long claimed and promoted the idea that these devices, bondbands, were the only way humans could make a safe bond with the superpowered creatures of Unitalia called Biunites. He himself had firmly stated to people on many occasions that not using a bond band, which faked the bodily frequency necessary for a Biunite to want to bond with you, was unsafe and was putting others around you at risk. But ever since he'd met his 13-year-old son's boisterous but astoundingly wise friend, Ogimaa Knight, Dai had learned how wrong he was. He'd seen the boy's natural connection to his own Biunite and how strong and loving it was. He'd also then watched his son Akeru and even his somewhat stubborn daughter Junko build their own natural relationships with these creatures and go on to win every single fighting tournament they entered with them. The contestants who used bond bands could rarely keep up, and the band-free fighters had such a seamless connection to their creature partners that it was as though they shared a mind. Whether they were fighting with the creature detached from them or merged with their own body, the creatures granting their abilities to their partners, Augie, Akeru, and Junko were always 5 steps ahead of the competition. Dai had always wanted a pairing with a Biunite himself, not for fighting in Vigilants tournaments like his kids, but simply because he loved and was fascinated by the creatures. He had been following Ogimaa's advice and steps to try and set himself in a mindset where he could make a natural bond with one of these creatures. But a task that seemed to come so easily to Augie and Dai's children was starting to seem hopeless for him. What made things worse was the looks he got from his fellow employees. He had been demoted from the bondband team at Avarit when it was discovered that his children were setting a so-called bad influence by not using the bands, and that he was exploring natural bonds himself. The only reason he was not let go was because he knew many of the deeper secrets of the company and they wanted to keep an eye on him. He was a pariah at work and felt like a traitor both to his co-workers and to himself for still working there at all. That was not a state in which it was easy to attune with nature and seek a bond with an unconditionally loving creature like a Biunite. Stacking more frustration on that, while Dai loved seeing his children thrive in their middle school Vigilance League, competing against both Biunite users and kids born with superhuman abilities. At these events, he'd always see at least one kid with a bond band who clearly didn't respect their creature partner. One in particular he'd seen at tournaments multiple times. His name was Leo Kilos, and he regularly insulted and berated his Biunite when it didn't perform as he wanted, even though it often seemed the mistakes the creature made were on Leo's own command. It tore at Dai's heart to see how this creature gave such unconditional love to this boy, even when he treated the creature so disrespectfully. The Biunite was called Unitalia, and it appeared like a lion mixed with a gorilla made of metal. It was one of the biggest and most intriguing Biunites Dai had ever seen. The second time Dai saw this boy compete at an event, he was frustrated enough to even approach the boy and tell him, "You know, if you wish for your Biunite to work with you in more unison, you should consider treating it with more respect." Leo looked up at him and said, "And you should consider not being an old creep. Buzz off, Grandpa." Dai stifled the firm smack he wanted to give this kid and said, "I am simply trying to provide advice that could be useful to you. There is no need to be rude." The boy's mother suddenly walked up. She was a short, slender woman in an expensive suit with triangular glasses. Dai actually had to hold back the thought that she was quite attractive. He soon regretted that thought. She said, "What's going on here, Leo? What did you do now?"
"I didn't do nothing, Ma. This old dude's just trying to tell me how to use my Biunite."
Dai calmly said, "Claiming that you didn't do nothing implies that you did do something, as it is a double negative, but that is not the point. I was simply suggesting to your son that..." The woman very sarcastically interrupted, Oh, thank you so much for teaching my son grammar. What an informative gift to humanity you are, coming up here and talking like the human equivalent of a fax machine. How about you go lecture your own kids about bringing dangerous creatures into a school without the proper equipment to keep them in line, Baldy, and leave my kid alone? She then raised a particularly unpleasant finger to Dai, put an arm around her son, and walked away. Unitalia didn't turn with them at first, and gave Dai a very curious look. He looked into the creature's eyes and felt overwhelming sorrow for it, before Leo called it on after him, and it followed. Dai simply stood there dumbfounded, then noticed how many people nearby were looking at him judgmentally. He walked away, muttering, "She was not actually that attractive now that I think about it." He saw that same boy and his mother at 2 events in the coming months, but kept his distance, ever more frustrated by how Leo treated Unitalia. Dai's frustrations mounted more and more as months went on, and eventually he felt truly hopeless. He'd been going with his children and Ogimaa regularly out into nature so they could play with their Biunites and help him try to attune more to nature and to his own genuine self to try and attract a Biunite to him. Eventually, he wanted to simply stop coming with them, but there was a dangerous criminal on the loose named Bobby Blunt, who may be both working with the Averitt Corporation and going after kids with natural bonds to Biunites. Dai had even spoken to the Protection Bureau about Averitt's possible connections to Blunt, and now felt all he'd done was put his children in more danger. So he kept trekking out to the woods, watching them all thrive with their bonded creatures and feeling more and more shame and embarrassment for his lack of ability to bond with one himself. Eventually, though, the ever-perceptive Ogimaa noticed how constantly Dai was looking quite forlorn and approached him as he sat on a stump, trying to hide his moping. "What's got you so bummed, Mr. Innoue?" He sighed. "Nothing, young Ogimaa. I am fine." Usually when people are fine, I don't think they sigh while they say it. Augie sat down on the small stump as well, clearly not having much in the way of personal space boundaries. "You can tell me about it, or you can keep pouting. Which one of those sounds better to you?" Dai rolled his eyes. "Well, as I imagine you've noticed, I've as of yet been unable to make a natural bond with a Biunite. My son and daughter did it in what feels like a very short time, and I am seeing no evidence of progress." "Yeah, I noticed. Why is that, do you think?" Augie asked. "If I knew, I would correct my course and do better, but I simply don't think it is possible for me. Not anymore." Augie nodded. "And that's exactly your problem, I bet." Dai raised an eyebrow at him. "What do you mean?" "My mom used to say that life will almost never give you anything good that you think you don't deserve, and if it does, but you still think you don't deserve it, you'll lose it just like that." "Yes, well, that is a cute notion, Ogimaa, but given the circumstances, I think it would be fairly universally agreed that I do not deserve a bond with a Biunite." Augie shook his head. "No, wrong." Dai clenched his teeth. "It is not wrong. I have done too many things to harm these creatures." Wrong, Augie interrupted. Dai stood up and leered down at Ogimaa. "I actively developed and sold the very products that allow foul wretches like that Leo Kilos boy to trick innocent Biunites into bonding with them just so they can treat them like they're nothing. I put my life into convincing people that this was the right thing to do, and then, once realizing I too was tricked by Averitt, felt so vindictive about it that I put my own children in danger by talking to the Protection Bureau about that Bobby Blunt fellow, and the leads I provided have garnered no results. He is still out there, my children may be in more danger, and it is my own fault. I may as well be the farthest thing from deserving of a bond with a Biunite." Without skipping a beat, Augie replied, "How many times do you think that Leo guy's Biunite has forgiven him for treating him bad?" Dai was caught off guard. "I am not sure. Many, I suppose." "Yeah, probably hundreds. That guy's the worst. But Biunites don't hold a grudge. Humans do that, even against ourselves sometimes. I mean, I don't, but some people clearly do," Augie said, gesturing to Dai. He stood up on the stump closer to Dai's eye level. "Sounds like all that stuff you did was stuff you were doing because you thought you were protecting people. You really thought it was safer to use bond bands, and I bet you worked on making them as safe as they could be, right?" He didn't want to meet Augie's eyes. "I suppose." Plus, as soon as you saw how much obviously better natural bonds were, you started looking into it and changing your mind. You didn't stay stuck in your ways just because it was easier like a lot of people do, right? Reluctantly, Dai nodded. And finally, you told the Protection Bureau stuff about that blunt guy because you knew it might bring them closer to putting away a criminal who wants to hurt people, right? He sighed again.
Yes, but I...
Nuh-uh, you can talk when you start being the mature one here, sir. You have been doing your best to do the right thing and help people all this time, and the only reason you don't deserve a Biunite right now is because you don't get how much you do deserve one for genuinely trying to do the right thing. The day you start accepting that you do deserve one, I bet you're gonna get one. So go easy on yourself. You're a good guy, Mr. Innoue. I know it, your kids know it, and soon a really cool protector-type Biunite is gonna know it too. So just, chill out on yourself. Dai found after that speech he was having a very hard time not tearing up. Upon noticing that, Augie called out, "Hey Akeru, Junko, your dad needs a hug right now." Without hesitation, his kids and their Biunites both came running, and that sight promptly started the waterworks. All of them gave him a big group hug, and he felt embarrassed at first, but eventually just let it all go. It was as if Ogimaa had just shoved a 100-pound weight off his back that he'd been choosing to carry without knowing it. He tried to spend the next few weeks heeding the boy's advice, but did still find it difficult to accept that he may be worthy of a bond with a Biunite. Every day he did get closer and closer, though. He could sense his guilt for his past lifting. The day he took his children and Augie to the Unitalia Middle School Vigilants finals, he was feeling pretty good about himself. Even after seeing Leo Kilos and getting frustrated as he often did. He spent much of that event in the stands with his mind racing as to how he could get that Biunite to separate from Leo, or at least get the boy to treat it better. Leo was doing surprisingly well in the tournament, despite his Biunite seeming distracted for much of the fights. It kept looking up into the crowd, away from its partner, and getting hit more often than it should have. Dai was embodying his nature as a protector, trying to come up with a way to encourage Averett to put some sort of vetting process in place to ensure cruel people, like Leo, couldn't get Biunites. He knew he didn't have much pull at the company now, but his focus remained on possible solutions. Into a fight between Augie and Leo, his mind was still locked on this concept. But he didn't have much longer to think, as seconds into the fight, Leo yelled, "You better stomp that kid's head in, mutt!" Unitalia had been charging towards Augie, but then skidded to a stop and just stared up into the crowd. Directly towards Dai. They linked eyes and he could practically feel the creature's heart sinking with his own. It looked back at Leo and sneered, then ran towards the stands, out of the arena. People between Dai and the charging creature scattered, but he remained transfixed on the approaching Biunite. It thumped its burly body up the stands, denting them and even breaking some, but then quickly slowed and lumbered right up to Dai. It looked him in the eyes once more, then down at his hand. Dai instantly understood the gesture, but could hardly believe what was happening. With his heart racing, he raised his palm slowly and pointed it towards the creature. It then leaned its forehead into his hand and started merging with Dai's body. Dai was a fairly lean man, but this beast of a Biunite merging with him made his shoulders far broader. It also granted him 2 massive metallic arms, as well as something Dai had not had in years. A full head of thick, luscious hair. Dai had completely lost track of what was happening around him. All he felt was the overwhelming love of this creature now merged with his own heart. He could sense its calmness and gratitude. It was as if the creature settling into his body was akin to the Biunite finding a castle to hide within from his former partner. It suddenly started to make sense to Dai why Leo in particular had frustrated him so much. Somewhere deep down, part of him must have had a sense that Unitalia was the perfect match for his own genuine self. By getting his self-worth sorted and accepting his protective nature, Dai had made the frequency of his own body so elevated that even the fake frequency made by Leo's bond band was not strong enough to keep Unitalia from wanting to bond with Dai. Of course, soon enough, Leo came stomping up into the stands, trying to retrieve his former partner.
"What are you doing, mutt? Get off him and get back in the battlefield now! What are you, trying to steal my Biunite, old man?"
His mother came huffing over soon after. "Release my son's Biunite now or I'll call the Protection Bureau on you so fast your bald head will spin. You want hair so bad, go get a raggedy bowl cut toupee to match your creep vibe. Dai would have been much more upset by how they were speaking to him if he weren't overwhelmed with excitement from finally having bonded naturally with a Biunite. While this is an unprecedented circumstance, Biunites are legally granted enough autonomy as intelligent creatures to decide for themselves whom they wish to bond with. If Unitalia chooses to leave you for someone it deems a better fit as its partner, you have no right to force it to remain with you. Dai was then able to go into much more detail about specific legal statutes around Biunites, thanks to his career history involving them. Leo's mother still tried calling the bureau, but after that event, Dai never heard from them again. Augie, Junko, and Akeru placed first, second, and third respectively in the Unitalia Middle School Finals, and Dai finally had a Biunite partner of his very own. Thereafter, Dai stopped doubting whether or not he deserved to have a Biunite. He could feel how happy the creature was to be both around him and merged with him, and it also came to get along very well and very quickly with Akeru, Junko, Augie, and their Biunites. He didn't all of a sudden become a perfect person, but Augie's words had sunk in. Dai knew his own intent was often to protect people, and so long as he stayed open to learning when and how he could do that better and correct his mistakes, he'd always feel as though he deserved the good that came to him. Plus, if Bobby Blunt or anyone else ever tried to harm his family, while combat didn't come naturally to him, with Unitalia by his side, he'd be all the more ready to fight to protect his loved ones or whoever else needed him. Well, I really hope you all enjoyed what is the last regular episode of Vigilants for this season, before we get to the two-part season finale bringing together pretty much every big character that we've had in the series so far. Originally, my plan for the end of this season was just to have a crossover between Ogimaa Knight here and Freya Sparks, but as the series went on, I got more ideas of how to bring everyone together, and it's going to be a lot cooler having a bunch of the other characters mixed into the story as well. Which, by the way, as you can tell from the stuff I'm holding up here, there's lots of Vigilance merch up on the PopCross Studios Teespring store: shirts, sweaters, notebooks, stickers. Of course, a book version of Vigilance is going to be released sometime in the near future after the season is done, and for those of you who have wanted hard copy versions available of my art and my stories, including from the whole saga of Multiverse Tales, be on the lookout for an announcement I'm probably going to have coming out soon. I got an idea this week that I'm really excited about. But anyway, I love you all, hope you all enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the finale. Goodbye.